So Erik, thanks so much for coming to speak in my class today. You're always the first guest speaker of the semester because I think you represent where people need to start. And this module is about identifying and researching your challenge. What is the societal challenge that people want to work on? And I know you've put so much thought into figuring out what you want to do, what you want your contribution to be in this world, and B, understanding the root causes. So those are the two things I want to chat about, and I figured I'd ask you to start by telling us how you ended up doing what you're doing, and how did you know what you want to work on in life?
I think I first started out by deeply and truthfully interrogating myself. Who am I? Who am I in this context? And what is it that I really want to be? And what is it that I really want to do as it relates to the people who are deeply affected by these systems? And then once I really thought about who I am and who I want to be, I started really in this kind of learning mode of sitting and listening to people, right? And not only people who are in the conditions that I'm trying to affect, but mostly people who have everything. How do they feel about folks who have nothing? How do they feel about Black people who have nothing, especially Black men?
That's really interesting. That's not what I would have thought of on your research journey. Like, tell me more about what made you think that that was important.
Yeah, you know, because I believe that there's this power in the the relationship between social capital and economic connectedness, right? And I know there's a guy now who talks about that very readily at Harvard, but before I think it was a legitimate academic discourse, it was something that I thought about quite deeply. And so, part of my journey is to be with and talk with folks who are vastly different.
Who are part of the problem.
Exactly, right? Because I want to understand if, one, they understand if it's a problem, that there's a problem. And if they don't know it's a problem, they definitely don't know that they're a part of it. And so having conversations with folks, and these conversations become tense, quite frankly, and very combative. Or some, walk away and say, they've learned something. And I've learned something as well. And what I've learned is not all wealthy white people are racist.
That's true.
They are a part of a racist system and have benefited from it. But what I've learned is most folks want to be in relationship with other people who are very much different than they are. And so understanding that research and that data and those relationships, because what was powerful is my research became relationships. And so understanding those folks and those relationships and understanding and acquiring a different type of language to talk about the issues that I'm trying to address has been a huge learning for me, because now I can serve as a bridge between those who have everything and those who have nothing, and understand both languages and articulate those languages to both spheres of life.
You can bridge the different worlds.
Exactly. And thankfully, and I thank God for this, that I do it credibly, right? That people believe me. And they believe me because of how I've lived my life and the fact that I've kept promises. And so that's kind of step two is kind of how research becomes relationships. And then thirdly, what do you do? Like, how do you get busy doing the work? And so my calling, quite frankly, and I say it's a calling because when you're called to do something, I believe that it chooses you. Like, I didn't choose to do economic development, economic justice, and all these things that I've done. I just wanted to help people. But these were the vehicles by which I would help people. And not just Black poor people and Black poor communities, but also white wealthy communities.
So how did your calling choose you?
By virtue of living and continuing to do this work, I hopefully in a very honest and maybe in a courageous way, having courageous, deep conversations with people, right? That I just kind of meandered into vehicles or tools of work. And now it is economic development. And so what I'm doing now with a team of amazing people is really building community through economic development, through community engagement, real community engagement, sometimes hurtful community engagement, but also with an eye towards bringing people together for the hope that they would share their humanity with each other. right? And so it's not just building black community, it's building community at large with all people.
Building bridges.
Yeah, but the eye, our eye and our aim is on impoverished communities. Our aim is on addressing racism by talking about racism. I don't think we will ever solve racism. I don't think, racism will ever go away, right? Because I think that, this is just my own, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I don't think you can DEI program racism out of people.
Yeah, I think you should say this actually, because I think some people who are trying to figure out their path to social change might feel like paralyzed by the magnitude of the problems, and maybe once they start researching their problems, they'll become even more paralyzed.
Wow.
But when you say like, you're not going to solve this problem, that might actually help, because then it's like, okay, I'm not going to solve it. That's not my goal, but my goal is to make it better in any way I can, and that's what you've been working towards.
That's so powerful. You're right. I don't think people will solve the problem of racism. However, they can solve the issue that they have in them as it relates to race.
Here in New Haven, you also mentioned you partnered with Data Haven, right? Which is
a
research firm.
I did.
What kind of research did you produce together?
My thinking behind partnering with Data Haven and Community Foundation for Greater New Haven was the fact that we being Concorp have this large $200+ million economic development project right around the corner from where we are sitting and talking. And what we're doing is we've targeted a historic black community that has languished in poverty for decades, Dixwell community, which is a beautiful community with beautiful people and buildings and so forth. Great history, deep history. And Dixwell being a major artery, if not the major artery in New Haven, has been left to decline. I don't know why or who, I think there are many to blame throughout the city, but nonetheless, it has been left to decline. And we, being Concorp, said, you know what? This community, this beautiful, historic black community deserves definitely more dignity and beauty than it has been given. And so we got busy and started executing a property acquisition strategy. It's of an old strip mall called the Dixwell Plaza, 8 acres of land. And we began to buy those buildings and assemble those buildings on that plaza. And now here we are 3 years later from the time we began. We now own the entire block from Webster Street to Charles Street on Dixwell Avenue and have master planned the entire site and going to deliver the things that the community said they needed as we spoke to them and listened to them. And so with that, we wanted to be definitely more thoughtful in our implementation in that community, given that many of the things that we endeavor to do are levers for gentrification. And so what I did was work with Data Haven and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, who commissioned this work where we created the Dixwell Newhallville Community Index.
Research becomes relationships, and relationships are what allow you to do your work, right? Like when you've been asked, how is all this possible, what Concord is doing, I've heard you reply, like, it's through relationships. But how do you get there, and where do you start, and how do you relate it to like desk research and looking up numbers and things like that?
That's a really great and important question. I think there is my relationships with the people, and there is the people's relationships to the data.
Yeah.
And so the data is incredibly important, one, because it points me in the right direction, and it allows me to know, I think, that what I am thinking about and attempting to do is correct, right? It affirms my empirical data. I think, and secondly, when I looked at the economic issues in Dixwell especially, looking at joblessness or, the poverty rate, the number of jobs, the number of people who are employed, the number of people who have received a high school diploma, single moms, those types of things. It allowed me to, it allowed me to be more deeply empathetic to the issues of the people, right? And the spirits of the people. And I say that because I made a grave mistake prior to, because my thought was, we had this these beautiful watercolors, this beautiful master plan, these things that we really wanted to do. And I would bring these beautiful designs to the people at community meetings. And I would talk to them about what we endeavor to do, what we are contemplating.
Here's the solution.
This is the solution, right? Now, a couple of mistakes I made. One, I was totally biased towards the people who look like me. I just thought they would just love me because they look like me.
Yeah.
And I was living in my assumption, the conditions they are.
That they'll trust
now
you.
in. Exactly. And so that was mistake number one. Mistake number two.
They didn't trust you off the bat.
Well, no, they did not. Mistake number two was I assumed they needed help. Right? They may not even need help or want my help.
Yeah.
Or Concord's help. Number three, the biggest mistake I made was I was always leading with the project. I was talking about the project with the idea of what we're going to do.
Yeah.
As opposed to leading with who I am. Because quite frankly, as I was doing research on the issues, they were doing research on me. And it was more important for them to know who I am, what my intentions are, where do I come from, than me bringing them this beautiful design.
Yeah, let's start with a conversation before we talk about plans.
Exactly.
That's how we roll in this course too. Like, first do your research before you even talk to people.
That's right.
Make sure you've covered your bases.
That's right.
Then just start talking to people before you start coming up with ideas and making plans.
That's right.
So it's like research, talking to people, and then designing your solution.
Yes, exactly.
So this affirms that your experience has been the same and you learned it the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, in some, right, you have to present yourself before you present the project, especially to people who are indigenous to the community that you endeavor to impact in a great way.
You didn't grow up in New Haven.
Exactly.
You may have grown up in poverty, but it wasn't here. They didn't know you. And that's also helpful for people who might be intimidated by not having that same level of lived experience in the challenge they're tackling.
Yes.
It's like no one has the full lived experience that's exactly the same as the people they're working with.
Yes.
So you just have to get to know them as much as possible and let them get to know you and build that trust.
That's right. Perfect.
So I'm going to share more about your work so that people can read about what you're doing.
Thank you.
But what I'm really grateful to you about is sharing your personal journey and how you went about figuring out what you wanted to work on and understanding it, because that's something no one would otherwise be able to find out by looking you up or looking Concorp up online.
That's true.
So I'm just so grateful to you for having this conversation.
I am always grateful to you.
Thank
you
you
so much,
E.
Teresa.
Thanks.
All right.